Shut off the auxiliary thrusters. We're coming in too hot. Captain Remiel Vann's voice cut through the low murmur of his crew, crackling with urgency. He gripped the command console tighter, his knuckles pale against the cold metal. The Exodus lurched, its engines groaning as they decelerated. Outside the viewport, the massive shape of the derelict ship loomed closer, dark and lifeless against the backdrop of the starry void. Its silhouette was unsettling, as if it had been abandoned to rot in space, a hollowed-out husk of a forgotten empire. Lieutenant Thane Yarick's voice followed with equal sharpness. "Auxiliary thrusters offline, Captain. We're locked in." The Talegros, as the crew had identified it, drifted silently, its hull nearly black, absorbing the dim light from the distant stars. No signals, no movement. The air in the bridge seemed to thicken as if the ship itself carried a weight far beyond its structure. There was no sign of life, no indication that this had ever been anything other than a tomb. Vann squinted out the viewport, still processing the surreal sight. "This doesn't sit right," he muttered, barely above a whisper. Yarick, ever the skeptic, shot him a sideways glance. "It's a gift, Captain. The Concordat says it's a gift." "Nothing's ever just a gift," Vann replied, his voice gravelly. His fingers hovered above the comms panel but didn't engage it. There was a deep-rooted instinct he trusted, a gut feeling that something was far too convenient here. Humanity had spent decades negotiating with the Concordat, decades of promises that never quite felt honest. And now, suddenly, a ship of unimaginable power, adrift and ready for the taking. "Something's wrong." Vann's voice deepened as his brow furrowed. He wasn't about to let the excitement of the crew cloud his judgment. "We're getting too close to this. Too easy." "I think you're being paranoid, Captain," said Dr. Rowan Tarkus, the lead scientist on board, his tone less confrontational but laden with the gentle skepticism of a man who thrived on facts. He tapped at his console, the laser plasma display casting a faint green glow against his face. "It's been abandoned for centuries. We're just lucky to find it." "Yeah, lucky," muttered Commander Jorik Zev, a wiry, no-nonsense officer whose cynical nature always seemed to match Vann's own. His fingers danced across the heads-up display, tracking their approach. "There's no way this thing just drifts here, ready to be taken. Let's not pretend like we don't know why it's abandoned." Vann's gaze flicked over to Zev, before returning to the dark mass of the Talegros. The crew's optimism grated against his instincts. They were used to finding things, artifacts, systems, even planets. But not like this, not so easy. "Adjust course by 10 degrees, Vann ordered, settling back into his chair. "We're not docking until we know exactly what's going on here. I don't trust it." "Aye, Captain." Zev didn't question the order, his fingers working deftly on the controls as the ship slowly shifted its approach, slipping closer to the derelict craft, its ancient frame growing larger with each passing second. The eerie stillness of space seemed to hang in the air, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The boarding process was methodical. Vann led the team as they suited up, the tightness of their pressure suits muffling the sounds of their movement. The airlock's hiss echoed, the sound thick and oppressive. As the hatch clamped open, the team filtered into the airlock chamber of the Talegros, the temperature inside dropping slightly as the doors sealed shut behind them. "Welcome to a graveyard," muttered Zev, his boots scraping against the cold floor as they crossed into the ship's main corridors. The metallic walls, coated in layers of dust, seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. The ship was eerily quiet. Vann could hear the faint crackling of his comm system and the slow drip of condensation somewhere deeper in the belly of the ship. It was a slow, deliberate silence, punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps. Tarkus took the lead, his footsteps echoing loudly, breaking the tension. He spoke without looking back. "The ship's structure is impressive, almost organic in its design, like the builders had a deep understanding of both form and function." Tarkus's voice was measured, fascinated. "We've only just started scraping the surface." Vann's eyes narrowed. The ship felt too much like a trap dressed in elegance. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he silenced them. There were too many questions here, and answers were in short supply. They made their way through winding corridors, their boots scraping against the ancient metal floors. The air inside the ship smelled stale but breathable, heavy with the musty scent of 1,000 years of neglect. The dim lighting from their suits cast long, jagged shadows that stretched across the walls, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. "Main engineering is 3 decks down," Tarkus stated, consulting his map. "We'll need to power up the systems before we can get a full analysis." Vann nodded, his eyes scanning the dimly lit halls. "Don't rush it. I want to be thorough. And keep your heads on a swivel. If we find something, it's not just going to be an error in the system." A low beep from Tarkus's console caught his attention, and Vann's gut tightened. "What's that?" Tarkus glanced at the readout. "This is odd. I'm reading residual energy signatures, Captain. This shouldn't be happening. It's almost like the ship is still alive, in a way." Vann stood still, his senses on edge. "What do you mean, alive?" "Not alive, per se," Tarkus clarified, a frown crossing his face. "But there's something here. Power readings, but they're too irregular to be natural. Someone's been tinkering with this ship." Vann turned toward Zev. "Shut off all comms, just in case. We don't want anyone overhearing." Zev didn't hesitate. The quiet beep of his control panel was the only sound as the comms went silent. Done. The next few hours were spent slowly working their way through the ship. Every room felt like an uncharted cave, a place that once housed life, but now was nothing more than hollow bones. The walls, marked with symbols Vann didn't understand, seemed to mock them at every turn, as if the ship itself held some secret. They reached the heart of the ship, the main engineering chamber. A giant cylindrical core, pulsating faintly, stood at the center of the room. It was beautiful in a way, sleek and crystalline, almost as though it was made from the very fabric of space itself. This is incredible," Tarkus whispered. "This core manipulates energy in a way we've only dreamed of." Vann studied it with a mix of awe and suspicion. "What's wrong with it?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as his senses heightened. Tarkus paused. "I'm not sure yet, but it's giving off strange pulses, feedback loops that don't make sense." Vann's instincts flared. "Then we shut it down for now. We need answers." But before Tarkus could respond, a low, barely perceptible hum vibrated through the chamber, and the room seemed to shift, as though the ship itself was waking. The tension in the room thickened. The Talegros had no intention of letting them leave easily. "Captain, something's wrong," Tarkus said, stepping back from the core. His face was pale, his eyes wide with realization. This ship, it wasn't meant to be a gift. It was meant to be a death trap. The low vibrations beneath their feet surged again, unsettling the air around them. Captain Vann's stomach tightened as he glanced back at Tarkus, who was still frozen by the quantum core. The room had shifted, its metallic walls suddenly vibrating, as if the ship itself was aware of their intrusion. The air felt thick, like the atmosphere of a forgotten city, a place that had once pulsed with life but now only echoed with distant whispers of what had been. "Did you feel that?" Tarkus asked, his voice barely audible above the subtle thrum that lingered in the chamber. Vann nodded, his eyes scanning the core, every fiber of his being screaming that this was no ordinary discovery. "Shut down all systems now." Zev moved swiftly to the control panel, his fingers flying across the heads-up display. The sound of the console's keys clicking was sharp in the otherwise silent room. He cursed under his breath as the system resisted, flickering and glitching in erratic pulses. "It's not responding," Zev muttered, frustration creeping into his tone. Vann's pulse quickened. "Override it. Do whatever you need to do." Tarkus was already at his side, his hands shaking as he worked his scanner over the core. The soft glow of the plasma display revealed his furrowed brow. "There's no logical reason for this," he said, his voice almost to himself. "This power should be stable, but it's wrong. It's like someone altered it to feed back into itself." Vann's gaze sharpened. He had been expecting sabotage, but this This was far more insidious than he had imagined. "Sabotage?" he asked, his voice low, almost a growl. "Who would do this? Why?" Tarkus stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he continued scanning the core. The connections here don't just show manipulation. They show deliberate failure, like someone rerouted the energy to ensure that when it was triggered, it would collapse on itself. A cascading energy leak. The words hung in the air like a poisoned arrow, threatening to shatter the fragile calm that had momentarily settled over them. If Tarkus was right, the ship wasn't simply a weapon. It was a trap, and they had just triggered the first few steps of its execution. "Can we reverse it?" Vann's voice was a low rumble, his tone cold as his mind raced. Every moment that passed, every bit of information, was another piece in the puzzle. The stakes were rising, and he couldn't afford to waste time. Tarkus stood still, processing the data as his fingers brushed over his tablet. "I'm not sure, Captain. The core's matrix is unlike anything we've seen. It's as if it's designed to collapse under its own weight. We may be able to isolate the feedback loops, but it'll take time, and we don't have much." Vann turned sharply, his eyes finding Zev's. The tension in the air was palpable, thick and suffocating. "We move fast," Vann ordered. "Start finding anything that might help us counteract this. Tarkus, can you access the ship's data core?" Tarkus gave a short nod. "I'll try, but—" "Just do it!" Vann cut him off, his frustration building like the pressure in a storm front. He wasn't angry at Tarkus. He knew his scientist was doing everything he could. But this was their ship now, and it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking control of this nightmare and turning it into their weapon. "Captain!" Zev's voice broke through the tension, his eyes flickering over the heads-up display. "You need to see this." Vann approached, his boots echoing in the cavernous chamber. Zev's display had switched to a stream of alien symbols, strings of code running faster than Vann could process. His stomach tightened again as he recognized the patterns, the subtle coding of a failsafe, hidden in plain sight. "This is sabotage," Vann muttered, his teeth clenched. "This was meant to destroy us, not save us." Tarkus, now fully immersed in the data, looked up at Vann. These systems were altered at a fundamental level. There are coded instructions hidden in the system's primary functions. They only activate when the core is powered on. His voice wavered slightly with disbelief. "It's designed to make sure we never escape. If we start the activation sequence, it'll destroy us, piece by piece." Vann's jaw tightened. The feeling of betrayal stung, sharp as glass. His instincts had been right, but this was something beyond what they could have anticipated. They weren't dealing with an accidental flaw. This had been planned, carefully designed by someone who had no intention of seeing humanity survive this test. "Start accessing the encrypted files," Vann commanded. "We need to understand everything, every code, every signal. We find out who did this, and we take this ship back. If it's a trap, we're going to make it ours." As Tarkus worked, the air seemed to grow colder, and Vann could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The ship, once a promise of power and knowledge, now felt like a ticking time bomb. The vibrations grew stronger again, this time accompanied by a low, persistent rumble from deep within the ship, as if the Talegros itself was awakening, realizing the humans aboard had discovered its terrible secret. "The sabotage is deep," Tarkus murmured, his voice tight. "This isn't just a system hack. It's layered, multi-phase. The core is set to destabilize space-time, starting small, then expanding, consuming everything around it. If we don't stop this now, this ship will collapse, and so will everything nearby." Vann absorbed the information without flinching. His mind was already running through the possibilities, the solutions. The Talegros could be theirs. If they acted quickly enough, they could gain control of the technology, even use the ship's quantum core to enhance humanity's capabilities beyond anything the Concordat had imagined. But if they failed, the thought was too terrifying to entertain. They had no choice but to succeed. "I'm pulling the team together," Vann ordered, his voice cold and steady. "Zev, Tarkus, get to the bridge. I want this system shut down now. We move fast, no mistakes. Zev moved, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the task ahead. I'll start preparations to hold off the Concordat. We can't let them see we're onto them. The urgency in Zev's tone was matched by Tarkus's quiet determination as he began to work faster. Time was against them. But Captain Vann wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything that had brought them to this moment. As Tarkus continued to decrypt the data, the ship's strange hum pulsed through the air, vibrating at a frequency Vann could almost feel in his bones. It was a warning, a call to action, and as the weight of the sabotage settled over him, Vann's resolve solidified. This would be their trap, and now they would turn it against those who thought they could destroy humanity. The air in the control room was thick, charged with the hum of frantic movement. Tarkus's fingers danced across the plasma display, eyes flicking from line to line, reading through layers of alien code. Each line brought new information, but none of it was comforting. The sabotage was deeper than they'd imagined. Vann stood behind him, arms crossed, watching his scientist work. He could feel the pressure in his chest, a constant weight that refused to ease. The Talegros was alive with its own secrets, and each moment they spent inside it only confirmed his worst suspicions. How much longer? Vann asked, his voice tight but calm. He wasn't the kind to lose his cool, but Tarkus could feel the thin edge of impatience that ran through his captain's voice. They had no time to waste. The Concordat would be watching. I'm decrypting the mainframe's encryption sequence, Tarkus said, his voice steady despite the tension. He paused, his fingers hovering over the console. But it's not just sabotage, Captain. This ship, it's a weapon of mass destruction designed to collapse space-time. I'm seeing multiple feedback loops buried in the quantum core's architecture. It's built to self-destruct, but not in the way we thought. Zev, standing by the door, looked up from the secondary display. His eyes narrowed. You mean the ship's supposed to blow up, but not just here? It'll take more than the Talegros with it. Exactly. Tarkus's gaze didn't waver from the screen. The core's energy is designed to cascade, triggering a ripple effect. If we don't stabilize it in time, it will destabilize not just this ship, but the entire sector. Vann's jaw tightened, but he didn't show the fear that gripped his insides. He wasn't going to lose this ship or let it be used as a weapon against humanity. We don't have the luxury of time, he said, looking over at Zev. Get the crew ready. We're going to need them where the action is. Zev nodded without a word, his movements sharp and quick as he moved toward the comm system to relay the orders. Tarkus continued to work, muttering to himself as the laser plasma displays flickered, lines of alien code streaming faster than he could decipher. His forehead creased in concentration as he tapped furiously at the console. Vann watched him for a moment, then stepped closer to get a better look at the screen. Tarkus paused. If we don't intercept the secondary layers of sabotage, the quantum core will collapse into itself. It's like a ticking time bomb, but instead of blowing up in a traditional sense, it tears through the fabric of reality. The cold air around them seemed to freeze for a moment, the weight of his words settling in like a stone. The ship was designed to tear apart everything in its path, a wave of destruction so powerful that it would wipe entire star systems from existence. And someone had given it to them, thinking humanity was too naive to figure it out. We're not getting out of here without making this right, Vann said, more to himself than anyone else. His voice was firm, grounded in the reality of the situation. There was no turning back now. We can still make it work, Tarkus muttered, his fingers still moving with mechanical precision. We just need to access the core's reset sequence, reroute the energy flow, and override the sabotage systems. It's a long shot, but it's the only chance we've got. Vann didn't hesitate. Do it. He turned, walking towards the main bay where Zev was preparing the crew. He didn't need to say much. The crew already knew the stakes. Each of them had been selected for their expertise, their drive. They were the best humanity had to offer, and Vann knew they'd follow him to the ends of the galaxy. Zev was waiting at the door, hands on his hips, eyes scanning the display. We're ready, Captain, he said, his voice clipped but confident. "The crew's in position. We've got teams ready to handle anything that comes our way." Vann nodded, his gaze shifting to the heads-up displays that showed the various sections of the ship. Every member of his crew had a job to do, and he trusted them to handle their parts. "Keep your eyes sharp," Vann said, his tone low but full of authority. "This isn't just about fixing a malfunction. We're dealing with a weapon, and that weapon might still be alive." "Understood, Captain," Zev replied, his voice steady. He didn't need to be told twice. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridors as the rest of the team assembled, ready for action. Vann's pulse quickened, but he kept his movements slow and deliberate. They were going to make this right, whatever it took. Back at the core, Tarkus was still working, the glow of the plasma displays casting an eerie light across his face. Vann returned to his side, watching as his scientist navigated the complex layers of sabotage hidden deep within the ship's systems. "Where are we?" Vann asked, a slight edge to his voice. "We're getting closer," Tarkus replied, his tone flat but determined. He tapped a few more commands into the console, his gaze flickering over the data. "I've located the override protocols, but they're buried deep. Whoever sabotaged this ship went to great lengths to cover their tracks. The system's layered, encrypted, and designed to mislead us at every turn." Vann didn't flinch. "Keep going." Tarkus nodded, fingers flying across the console. His face tightened as he deciphered the next string of code. "We're almost there. Just a few more seconds, and we can reroute the energy flow." Vann's thoughts raced as Tarkus worked. Each second felt like an eternity. Every flicker of light, every beep of the console made him more aware of the danger they were in. The ship was a trap, yes, but it was also a gift, an opportunity. Whoever had left this weapon behind had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity. "Got it," Tarkus said, his voice low with relief. "The core's reset sequence is accessible. I'm bypassing the sabotage. We'll have control over the ship's systems in a few minutes." Vann allowed himself a brief exhale, but it wasn't a time to relax. Not yet. He turned to Zev, who had joined them at the core. "We've got a chance, but we need to keep our eyes open. The Concordat could be closer than we think. Get the teams ready to defend this ship. If they've been watching us, they'll be here soon." Zev's face hardened. "Understood, Captain." As Tarkus finished the reset process, the Talegros seemed to shudder, the vibrations intensifying for a brief moment before they began to stabilize. The soft glow of the plasma displays flickered one last time before the ship's systems seemed to come back online. Tarkus let out a small sigh of relief. "We've done it. The core's under our control now." Vann stared at the displays, the weight of the moment sinking in. The ship was no longer an enemy. It was their weapon. It had been designed to destroy, but now it could be their key to the stars. "Prepare for anything," Vann said, his voice steady. "This isn't over yet, but for the first time we're in control." The air in the control room was thick with the hum of focused energy. The plasma screens flickered in the dim light, their sharp glow reflecting off the faces of Vann and his crew. Tarkus was still at his console, fingers moving with mechanical precision, his face drawn in concentration as he monitored the now stabilizing quantum core. The room smelled faintly of scorched wiring, a reminder that they were working against time. Every second felt heavier, like the moment before a storm broke. "We're almost there," Tarkus muttered, his voice steady but betraying the tension beneath. His eyes flicked from his scanner to the main heads-up display, tracking the fluctuations in the core. "If we activate it now, it should hold steady, but we'll need to stay vigilant." Vann nodded, his gaze steady, not revealing the anxiety that churned beneath. His mind was already racing through the steps ahead. If they triggered the core improperly, it could wipe them all out in an instant. But if they did it right, this ship, once a death trap, could become their strongest weapon. It was a chance humanity couldn't afford to miss. He wasn't about to let that opportunity slip through their fingers. "Everyone ready?" Vann's voice cut through the tension, low and commanding. His eyes scanned the crew. Zev was by the door, arms folded, his posture rigid. his eyes scanning the multiple heads-up displays around the room. Yorick stood by the secondary consoles, monitoring the ship's structural integrity. They had all seen how the sabotage worked, how the system had been built to break under pressure. Now, it was their turn to fix it. Zev's expression was grim but resolute. "We're ready. Just give the word." Vann walked toward Tarkus, his boots barely making a sound on the cold floor. "You're sure this will work?" Tarkus glanced up briefly, his eyes tired but sharp. "The sabotage was designed to destroy the core, but we've isolated the feedback loops. We've rerouted the system. If we engage the primary sequence now, we can hold it. But I can't promise it'll be easy. The energy levels are unstable, and the Concordat will have noticed we've made a move." "We'll handle that," Zev interjected, his voice steady but with a hint of impatience. "Once we engage, we can't afford distractions. We need to keep the crew focused." Vann turned back to Tarkus, his gaze firm. "Activate it. We're out of time." Tarkus didn't hesitate. He pressed a final sequence into the plasma display, and the ship seemed to shudder, its dark walls reverberating with a low, deep vibration. The core's glow intensified, filling the room with an almost blinding light. For a moment it felt as though the entire ship held its breath, suspended in the space between action and destruction. Then the light flickered. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy. A brief flash, too quick to register completely, swept through the room, leaving a lingering, tingling sensation in the air. It was a moment of dread, a moment where they could all feel the weight of their decision. "It's holding," Tarkus confirmed, his voice taut with relief. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling sharply. "We've done it. The core is stable." Vann's chest tightened, but he didn't allow himself to feel the full weight of the victory. Not yet. "Get to the bridge. We need to prepare for anything." The crew immediately sprang into action, scattering to their assigned positions. Zev was already coordinating with the other teams, ensuring that their lines of defense were in place. Yorick and his engineers were checking for any signs of external interference. Vann moved quickly, walking over to the secondary plasma display, where he could see the exterior view of the Talegros. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the stars, looking for any sign of movement, any indication that the Concordat was aware of their actions. He could feel the ship's pulse underfoot, each subtle vibration reminding him that they were holding something dangerous. The quantum field was alive now, a force of nature that could reshape the galaxy itself. It was their tool, their weapon, but it was also a risk, a reminder that this power could easily slip beyond their control. As Tarkus approached the bridge, Vann turned his attention back to the task at hand. The Concordat would be close, he knew that much. They wouldn't let humanity gain control of something like this without consequences. Zev's voice came through on the comms, cutting through Vann's thoughts. "Captain, we've got ships on approach. The Concordat's fleet is moving in. They know what we're doing." Vann's hand tightened around the comm panel. "How far out?" "Too close," Zev replied, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency creeping in. "We're looking at maybe 15 minutes before they're in firing range. They'll be here sooner than we can prepare for." Vann's mind raced. He had known this moment was coming. The Concordat wouldn't allow humanity to control a ship like the Talegros. Not when they had intended to use it against them. The stakes had never been higher. They had to be ready, but more importantly, they had to stay ahead of the enemy. Time was running out, and their advantage wasn't going to last forever. "Activate all defensive systems," Vann ordered. His voice was calm, but beneath the surface, his thoughts were moving at breakneck speed. "Prepare the quantum field to extend beyond the ship's hull. We're not letting them through." Tarkus's voice came through, focused and precise. "We've bypassed the Concordat's sabotage. The quantum core is ready. But if we extend the field beyond the ship, we're committing to full engagement. It'll lock us down until we can regain control of the energy flow. Once we do that, there's no turning back." "Understood," Vann said, without hesitation. "Activate the field. Let's show them what we've got." As Tarkus engaged the system, the ship seemed to come alive. The core's power expanded, an invisible wave of energy rippling outward from the Talegros, reaching into the stars beyond. The room seemed to pulse with it, the walls shaking as the quantum field stretched into space. Vann could feel it in his chest, a low, heavy pressure as the ship's power began to bend the fabric of reality itself. It was like nothing they had ever experienced before. The fabric of space itself was warping, distorting around the ship as the quantum field began to take hold. For a moment the stars outside seemed to flicker as though they had been stretched out of time. Then the first enemy ship appeared on the monitors, fast and sleek, cutting through the void. It was a Concordat destroyer, its weapons already powered up and locked onto their position. Vann's eyes sharpened. "Stand by, everyone. We don't fire unless they make the first move." Tarkus's voice cut in, clear and firm. "We've got them contained. The quantum field is holding steady." Vann nodded, his gaze fixed on the approaching ships. "Good. Now we wait." His mind raced, but his face remained unreadable. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when humanity proved its worth. The Concordat had underestimated them. Now it was time to turn the tables. The tension on the bridge was thick, heavy as a storm cloud on the brink of bursting. Vann's eyes never left the heads-up display as the Concordat fleet closed in, a swarm of sleek ships, their weapons primed, their intentions clear. They knew what was happening aboard the Talegros. They knew humanity had taken control of the core. Now it was time to decide whether they would retreat or face the wrath of the very ship they had sent to destroy Earth. 10 minutes, Zev's voice came over the comms, cool and collected, his eyes tracking the fleet's movements on the plasma display. The numbers on the screen shifted, showing the growing proximity of the Concordat ships. "They'll be in weapons range any second." Vann nodded, his jaw tightening. The Talegros was no longer a relic, a piece of ancient technology. It was their weapon now. It was a tool they could use to reshape the galaxy's balance of power. But it was also a trap, a gift designed to ensnare them. And he wasn't about to let the Concordat dictate humanity's fate. "Ready all defensive systems," Vann ordered. "Activate the quantum field. We hold nothing back." Tarkus, who had been monitoring the core's stabilization, now tapped a few commands into his console. His eyes were locked on the data, hands steady, but his mind alert. "The quantum field is stable. If we extend it now, we'll trap their entire fleet in it. The energy spike will render them powerless, unable to communicate or engage." Zev's voice cut through the charged atmosphere, sharp and calculating. "They'll be sitting ducks, but we're risking a lot of energy here, Captain. If we don't manage it, we could lose everything." Vann turned slowly, his gaze steady, his face unreadable. "We don't lose." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person on the bridge felt the weight of his words. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for something far greater. A chance to prove that humanity was not just another species on the fringe of the galaxy, waiting for the power of the Concordat to dictate their future. They were more than that. They had learned. They had adapted. And now, they would show the galaxy just what it meant to underestimate humanity. The first wave of Concordat ships entered firing range, their weapons flashing to life, cutting through the void like streaks of lightning. But Vann's crew was already moving. Tarkus pushed a final set of commands into the plasma display, and a pulse of energy surged through the Talegros, rippling outward in a controlled wave. The air in the control room seemed to thicken, a strange hum filling the space as the quantum field extended, wrapping around the Talegros like an impenetrable shield. The first shots from the Concordat fleet bounced harmlessly off the expanding field, leaving nothing but fleeting trails of light in their wake. The enemy's ships struggled, their engines faltering as the quantum field locked them in place. Their weapons sputtered, their communications cut off, leaving them helpless. Zev let out a sharp laugh, but it was filled with grim satisfaction. "They're trapped, Captain. They can't move. They can't fire." "Good," Vann said, his voice low, but a slight smirk tugged at his lips. He'd known this would work. He hadn't allowed for failure. "Now we show them what happens when you try to control humanity." He turned toward Tarkus. "Is the core ready?" Tarkus didn't hesitate. "It's ready. The field's power is fully contained. We've got enough energy to keep the Concordat fleet contained indefinitely. But if we push the core further, we can do more. Vann's eyes gleamed with determination. Push it. Make them understand. As Tarkus engaged the command, the quantum core flared brighter, its energy expanding in a violent surge. The Talegros seemed to groan under the force, its dark hull almost shaking with the power that now radiated from within. The core pulsed, sending out waves of energy so strong they distorted the very fabric of space around them. The light from the plasma displays flickered erratically, the crew's shadows dancing across the walls as the ship's immense power rippled outward. The Concordat ships, helpless in their quantum prison, began to flicker in and out of existence, their systems warping under the pressure. They were caught in a web of energy that they couldn't escape, trapped within a cage of their own making. Tarkus looked up from his console, his eyes wide with awe. "Captain, we've done it. We've stabilized the field. The Concordat's fleet is completely incapacitated." But Vann wasn't finished. His mind, sharp and calculating, had already moved past the victory in front of them. This was only the beginning. He turned to the crew, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "We're not stopping here. We're taking control of the galaxy's future. The Concordat thought they could control us. They thought they could use us to wipe out an entire solar system. But they didn't count on us being smart enough to turn their trap into our key to the stars." Zev's expression shifted from the sharp edge of the battlefield to a more contemplative look, as if the weight of Vann's words was sinking in. "You think they'll just accept this? That they'll stand by and let us walk away with all this power?" Vann's gaze locked with Zev's, his resolve unwavering. But they won't have a choice. With a few commands, the plasma displays flickered to life again, and the Concordat's central command came into view. The face of the alien diplomat, the observer, appeared on the screen, his features tense, eyes flicking nervously. He didn't speak at first, but the fear in his expression was clear. Vann straightened, stepping toward the screen. His voice was cold, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You thought you could break us. You thought you could force humanity into submission by giving us a weapon and expecting us to fail. But you underestimated us. You didn't understand what we were capable of." The observer's mouth opened, but no words came. His expression faltered, his lips parting in shock. The other Concordat officials behind him stood motionless, their eyes wide with disbelief. Vann could almost feel the weight of their sudden fear. "We've learned more than you ever expected," Vann continued, his tone unwavering. "Your trap didn't break us. It gave us exactly what we needed to take control of our future. You wanted to control us, but now the power is ours." The observer's eyes narrowed. You would risk war with us over this?" Vann's smirk was cold, almost mocking. "You started the war when you tried to destroy us. You wanted to keep humanity weak, dependent on your guidance, but instead, you handed us the keys to the galaxy's future. And now we'll show you exactly what happens when you underestimate humanity." The screen cut off as the Concordat officials scrambled, panic seeping into their voices, but Vann didn't need to hear the rest. He had made his point. The galaxy had just witnessed the rise of humanity. Turning to his crew, Vann allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had known all along that they were more than just survivors. They were learners, adapters, innovators. And now the Concordat would never forget that. "Prepare to release the quantum field," Vann ordered. "Let their ships go. They'll need time to process what's happened here." As the field began to retract, the Concordat ships, now freed from their energy prison, floated helplessly in space. They had come to destroy humanity, but instead, they had given humanity the ultimate weapon. As Vann stood on the bridge, staring out at the helpless fleet before them, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what had been accomplished. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of the galaxy. It was no longer a species at the mercy of others. They had proven their worth, and now they were ready to take their place among the stars. "We've only just begun," Vann said, his voice low but resolute. "Let them think they won. We've won the war, and we've won the future. As the Talegros sailed into the void, its quantum core still humming with power, the crew knew one thing for certain: humanity would never again be underestimated.